Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. NATO leaders are meeting in Washington, D.C. to celebrate their 75th anniversary. But they have less to celebrate and more to worry about on the future of Ukraine and a future featuring Donald Trump as U.S. President. We'll discuss that. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi is in Austria today, the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 41 years. We'll bring you the highlights. Also discussing if India is eyeing a bigger role in the Ukraine conflict. Modi raised it again, calling for dialogue and offering all possible support to bring peace. Back in America, the presidential contest has become a circus, with Trump challenging Biden to a golf match. Also, why Bangladeshis are protesting against government job quotas, why China has imposed caps on salaries of financial executives, why Samsung workers in South Korea have gone on an indefinite strike, how Pakistan justifies the ISI openly snooping on people, what Boeing and NASA may be hiding about astronauts stranded in space, and what is the no-spend challenge that the Gen Z swears by for financial management. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. The Israeli army orders all residents in Gaza City to flee. The warning follows the heaviest combat operations there in recent months. In the last 4 days, Israel has hit as many schools across Gaza, sparking international outrage. The upsurge in fighting comes as ceasefire talks resume in Qatar. Rwanda says the UK migrant deal did not stipulate returning funds. Just days ago, Britain's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer had scrapped the deal. The scheme was to deport asylum seekers to the East African country. The UK has already paid Rwanda over $300 million. Another blow to the military junta in Myanmar. Rebels seize a town along a key trade highway to China. Since last month, the northern Shan state has seen intense fighting. The clashes have broken the truce, which was mediated by China in January. Hundreds stranded in rural Tibet after heavy rains. China is battling extreme weather across the country. In the north, it is reeling under heat waves, while rains have triggered floods and landslides in the south of the country. A record-breaking heat wave threatens half of America's population. Around 162 million people are at risk. The scorching heat caused a road to buckle in Washington, while an overheated bridge in New York City got stuck. On Sunday, Las Vegas recorded its highest temperature ever. And Microsoft gives up its OpenAI board seat. It comes amid scrutiny of the artificial intelligence market by antitrust regulators. Microsoft has a $13 billion tie-up with OpenAI. This has raised concerns about the tech giant's influence over its smaller partner. For the past 2 days, we've been focusing on Russia, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi was visiting. Tonight, let's start from the other end of the world, where Russia's enemies are meeting, the NATO countries. Their summit kicked off in Washington, D.C. today. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's basically a military alliance from the Cold War era. The Cold War is long over, but NATO still lives on, and it's growing bigger. This summit was supposed to be a celebration marking 75 years of NATO's existence, with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden. The group started with 12 members, now it has a total of 32, so this was meant to be a birthday party of sorts. But that's not how it turned out. When the leaders met, they were confronted with challenges, differences, misaligned priorities, and the prospect of Donald Trump returning as president. So at 75, NATO has more to worry about and less to celebrate. Their biggest challenge is the war in Ukraine. Despite all military and monetary assistance, it isn't going their way. Russia is making gains. So NATO has to decide what it does next. How much support should it give Kyiv? And where should it draw the line? Unfortunately and unsurprisingly, they cannot decide. The allies are divided, and leading them is their host and US President Joe Biden. He has announced fresh military support to Kyiv.
Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine continues, and Putin wants nothing less than Ukraine's total subjugation. Today, I'm announcing the historic donation of air defense equipment for Ukraine.
Historic donation, he says. It's in response to this week's attacks. Ukraine suffered a wave of airstrikes from Russia on the eve of the NATO summit. The attacks killed at least 38 people. This was Russia's bloody message to NATO. In response, NATO is readying a new aid package. Military support worth $43 billion. That's what's on the table. But even that may not be enough. The NATO Secretary General is asking for more. That's Jens Stoltenberg, the outgoing leader of this group. He says member countries must make multi-year commitments to Ukraine. The specifics are still being discussed. Meanwhile, Ukraine has laid out its expectations. It wants more weapons, more military support, and a free hand to strike deep inside Russia.
Imagine how much we can achieve when all limitations are lifted. If American leadership makes a step forward and allows us to destroy Russian military aircrafts on their bases.
As you can see, President Zelensky is attending the summit, but Ukraine is not part of NATO, and it is not expected to get membership anytime soon. It's a contentious issue, NATO membership for Ukraine. In fact, it's one of the reasons that Russia gives for starting the war. Ukraine wanted to join NATO, and that would have brought the military alliance to Russia's border. Now, 2 years on, Kyiv is still keen to join. It has some backers like France, but not everyone is on board. For starters, Joe Biden himself is reluctant. He does not want to give any guarantees to Ukraine. Same with Germany. It doesn't want the NATO to overcommit. So what's the way out? A compromise. Tomorrow, the NATO will release a summit declaration. It is expected to be worded in such a way that all sides are happy. Reports say NATO members will promise Ukraine a quote-unquote irreversible path to membership. But it will come along with a long list of terms and conditions.
To invite a new ally, we need consensus. All allies agree that Ukraine will become a member, but it's too early to say exactly when that will happen. What I can say is that we are moving together with Ukraine closer and closer to NATO membership.
The membership invite won't come at this summit. That's out of the question. Even Kyiv knows that. Until the war is over, they won't get a NATO membership invite. So Zelensky will have to wait. And at this point, he has a bigger concern. Donald Trump.
I hope that if people of America will vote for President Trump, I hope that his policy with Ukraine will not change.
Will the U.S. keep supporting Ukraine if Trump becomes president? Zelensky cannot be sure of it. Will the U.S. remain committed to NATO if Trump becomes president? NATO members cannot be sure of it. So Trump's shadow is looming over this summit, and with good reasons. America is heading into a presidential election. As of today, the former president, Donald Trump, is ahead in the race. He's polling better than Joe Biden. In the past, he's walked out of multilateral commitments, and he said that America will not pay for the security of others. All of this makes American allies in NATO nervous. So they're pushing for protections. They want to Trump-proof NATO. And how will they do that? Well, the UK's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer has dropped some hints. He says the NATO needs to lock in some financial commitments for the long term.
My message is very, very clear that this NATO summit is an opportunity for allies to stand together.
He's talking about the NATO budget and the financial contributions of each member. Every NATO member must allocate 2% of their budget to the military. But some allies are not pulling their weight, like Canada. Canada's defense budget is around $20 billion. That's just 1.34% of its GDP. It's way below the 2% promise. And Canada has no plans to raise its budget yet to meet its spending target. Now, reports say NATO members plan to confront Canada on this. So there's a lot of ground to cover in this summit. 2 years back, NATO was staring at irrelevance. The war in Ukraine has given this group a new purpose. Today, it has more members than ever before. But you see, size does not guarantee success. NATO is also a divided house, with serious gaps in its military strength and uncertainties related to funding. Not all member states are pulling their weight. So while a 75th anniversary should be time for celebration, NATO would do well to make it an opportunity for introspection. While the NATO summit takes place in Washington, another meeting is taking place in Europe, in one of the few non-NATO countries there. That's Austria. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Vienna today. He dropped by after his Russia visit and he was given a grand welcome. You saw the Austrian artists singing their rendition of Vande Mataram. For our non-Indian viewers, Vande Mataram is a verse associated with India's independence struggle. Today, it's a patriotic song, making the Austrian rendition a heartfelt gesture. The Indian Prime Minister lauded this performance. He put this post on social media, praising Austria's vibrant musical culture. Of course, Modi wasn't in Vienna just for the music. There was much more on the agenda. After all, this is a rare trip. India and Austria are celebrating 75 years of diplomatic relations, and that is a long time. But state visits between the two countries are rare. It has been 41 years since an Indian Prime Minister visited Austria. The last visit was in 1983 by Indira Gandhi. That's how long it's been. So there was a lot to catch up on and a lot of new opportunities to explore. Yesterday was for catching up. Prime Minister Modi landed in the afternoon. He was greeted by the Austrian Foreign Minister, who is also Austria's former Chancellor, their equivalent of a Prime Minister. Modi spent yesterday meeting and greeting various people like the Indian diaspora in Vienna and the current Austrian Chancellor, Karl Nehammer. The two leaders, the two heads of state, had dinner and then took some selfies as well. It was around this time that Modi saw the Austrian artists perform Vande Mataram. So that was what took place yesterday, the catching up part. Today was about getting down to business. Prime Minister Modi arrived at Austria's Federal Chancellery. It's effectively their Prime Minister's office. He was given a ceremonial guard of honor when he arrived. Take a look at this. After that, the Indian Prime Minister signed the guest book at the Chancellery and then he got down to business. Prime Minister Modi and Austrian Chancellor Nehammer held bilateral talks. It was a delegation-level bilateral and a host of issues were taken up like trade and investment.
Today, there are excellent economic and trade relations with India, marked by mutual trust and confidence. 2.7 billion euros is the current trade volume. More than 150 Austrian businesses are operating in India and we expect the number to increase. There will also be Indian investments in Austria.
दोनों देशों की युवा शक्ति और आइडियाज को कनेक्ट करने के लिए स्टार्टअप ब्रिज को गति दी जाएगी। मोबिलिटी और माइग्रेशन पार्टनरशिप पर पहले से समझौता हुआ है। यह लीगल माइग्रेशन और स्किल्ड वर्कफोर्स की मूवमेंट में सहयोग देगा। सांस्कृतिक और शैक्षणिक संस्थाओं के बीच आदान प्रदान को बढ़ावा दिया जाएगा।
It's a lot to unpack, but let's look at the key points. More Austrian businesses are expected to open shop in India. Cooperation between Indian and Austrian startups is expected. An agreement on legal migration has already been reached, and this could help the movement of skilled workers. Those were some of the key points discussed at the bilateral. After this, Prime Minister Modi took part in a business summit. 40 businesses took part. They were from both India and Austria. Hopefully, this translates into more cooperation and partnerships. So that was the major focus of this summit, increasing economic cooperation. And India seems to be on the right track here. Let's see how this plays out in the months to come. So that was one part of Prime Minister Modi's summit in Austria. But business wasn't the only thing on the agenda. A lot of time was also devoted to a major issue: the war in Ukraine. The war has been raging for almost 2.5 years now. The repercussions have been felt across the world, but especially in Europe. The continent wants a solution. Austria does too. So Vienna was especially keen to host Prime Minister Modi right now, immediately after his trip to Russia.
Before his visit to Austria, the Prime Minister saw the Russian President. For me, it was therefore especially important to hear the Prime Minister's assessment on Russia's intentions in regard to the peace process. Our common goal is for a comprehensive, just and sustainable peace in accordance with the UN Charter to become possible.
Austria wants peace. It wants an end to the war in Ukraine, and the Austrian Chancellor decided to ask Prime Minister Modi about this. Here was Modi's response.
मैंने पहले भी कहा है कि यह युद्ध का समय नहीं है। समस्याओं का समाधान रणभूमि में नहीं हो सकता। कहीं भी हो, मासूम लोगों की जान की हानि स्वीकार्य नहीं है। भारत और ऑस्ट्रिया शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली के लिए डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी पर बल देते हैं। इसके लिए हम दोनों मिलकर हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार हैं।
India is ready to provide all possible support. That's a key point. What does this mean? Is India seeking a bigger role now? Does New Delhi want to take a more hands-on approach to play the role of mediator? Because if any country is qualified, it would be India. Think about it. Which other major nation is in India's position? Who else shares good ties with both Russia and the West? Look at what India has done over the last 2 years. Since Russia invaded Ukraine, India has refrained from joining the Condemn Russia bandwagon. New Delhi has condemned the war in all its forms, but not Moscow. At the United Nations, India has always abstained from voting against Russia. It has sought to find a constructive solution. Instead of being part of the public spectacle at the United Nations, India's approach has been more subtle, more pragmatic. In all matters, India has been buying Russian oil, causing great public outrage in the West. But this is the same West that buys the oil after India refines it. So New Delhi chose to avoid the hypocrisy, and in the process kept good ties with Russia. At the same time, India has been sending aid to Kyiv, humanitarian aid, multiple consignments of it, so that lives can be saved. Last month, India participated in the Ukraine-led peace summit in Switzerland, but refused to sign the joint communique because Russia was not invited to this summit. So New Delhi's position has been consistent. Dialogue is the way forward, but a sustainable solution cannot be found without Russia in the room. While he was in Moscow, Prime Minister Modi said this to Vladimir Putin.
एक्सेलेंसी, एक मित्र के नाते मैंने हमेशा कहा है कि हमारी भावी पीढ़ी के उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए शांति सर्वाधिक आवश्यक है। लेकिन मैं ये भी जानता हूं कि युद्ध के मैदान में समाधान संभव नहीं होते। बम, बंदूक और गोलियों के बीच समाधान और शांति वार्ताएं सफल नहीं होती हैं, और हमने वार्ता के माध्यम से ही शांति के रास्ते अपनाने होंगे।
Modi told Putin that there are no solutions on the battlefield. It was a plea to stop the war. And how did Putin respond? Take a look.
I am grateful to you for the attention you pay to the most pressing problems, including trying to find some ways to resolve the Ukrainian crisis, of course, first of all, peacefully.
That response seems like something reserved for a friend, like India. Imagine a Western leader saying what Modi said to Putin. His response would have not been the same. He would have dismissed the Western leader, pointing to their own complicity in the war. But India does not have that baggage. So India can deliver messages of peace without worrying about skeletons in the closet. There are other nations with close ties to Russia. China is the first one that pops to mind. But Beijing is close only to Russia, not the other side. On the contrary, the West views China as a threat. But that's not the case with India. Over the years, India has proved to be a friend to all sides, which puts New Delhi in a unique position. The question is India looking to leverage this goodwill that it has accumulated over the years? Does it even seek to become a mediator? Prime Minister Modi's line about India being ready to provide all possible support, those are the words he used, ready to provide all possible support. This hints at India's ambitions, about its desire to play peacemaker. Modi has spoken about Ukraine thrice in the last 2 days. So this is not a coincidence. New Delhi seems to be hinting at a larger role. And this would be new for India. It usually does not get involved in external conflicts. At most, it has tried to maintain peace in the neighborhood in South Asia, but that's it. So a global role will be almost unprecedented for India. A first attempt to bring peace in another continent. Also, this is a tall order. It won't be easy because think about the war situation at the moment. Ukraine is struggling to defend itself. It has lost 4 major regions to Russia, 5 if you count Crimea. Russia is making gains in the east. It is taking over key towns like Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region. Why would a nation stop when it's winning, especially if it had to give up everything it has gained over the years? Ukraine says it will only agree to what it calls a just peace. The Austrian Chancellor used the same terminology, a just peace. What does that mean? It means that Europe wants Russia to give back everything that it has won so far, including Crimea, which it took way back in 2014. Russia will most likely never agree to this, even if a friend like Prime Minister Modi asks it of Putin. So you see why peace is so hard to achieve here. No side wants to give up an inch, so a peace deal seems almost impossible at this point. But out of all the countries in the world, India might be best placed to find the solution to this impossible conundrum. For our next story, let me ask you a question. How do you choose who's a better leader? In most countries, it's standard procedure. There are debates, interviews, rallies. But looks like America has another unique solution, a game of golf.
I'm also officially challenging Cricket Joe to an 18-hole golf match right here. On Doural's Blue Monster, considered one of the greatest tournament golf courses anywhere in the world, one of the great courses of the world. It will be among the most watched sporting events in history, maybe bigger than the Ryder Cup or even the Masters.
That was Donald Trump challenging Joe Biden to play golf with him. Imagine that, America's 2 presidential candidates on the golf field, swinging it out of the park to become the next president. It'll be a must-watch, we'll say. But it's also a stark picture of American politics. Anyone who's reading these headlines is asking just one question. What on earth is happening there? So let me give you a brief. 13 days ago, America held its first presidential debate of this election. Joe Biden against Donald Trump. And how did that go? Well, to call it a train wreck would be kind. The US president fumbled. He was mumbling words. He forgot what he was saying. Biden made Trump look better, and that's harder said than done. Since then, the White House has been in damage control mode. It's come up with a series of excuses that Biden was jet-lagged, that he had a cold, but nothing has managed to stop the questions. Is Biden fit to lead? Democrats are asking this. So is the American public. Hollywood actor George Clooney joined the chorus today. Remember, he co-chaired a fundraiser for Biden just weeks ago. And now the longtime Biden supporter is asking him to step down. And amid all of this chaos, Biden has decided to host another public event, this time the NATO summit. Like we just told you, the military alliance is turning 75, still younger than Biden though. So how is he faring there at the NATO summit? Well, slightly better. Yesterday he gave a speech, honored the NATO Secretary General, met other NATO leaders, and more importantly, he stuck to the script. Biden read from the teleprompter. He did not try to go off script. No stray comments whatsoever. And that seemed to have worked in his favor. So it isn't a disaster yet. But the question is, how much longer? Look at this new report. In the last 8 months, a Parkinson's expert has visited the White House 8 times. So once every month. Now, Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder. What does that mean? It means that your nervous system degenerates over time. So with age, it gets worse. What are the symptoms? Slow movement, loss of balance, and a general stiffness in motion. And where have we seen all of this before?
Mr. President, thank you.
The White House says the Parkinson's expert was not visiting Biden. He was there treating other staff. But we'll take that answer with a pinch of salt. Because look at what they've been hiding. Here's another report. It talks about how Biden's staff prepares for events. Those familiar with the situation say that it's like a NATO summit. There are detailed instructions everywhere, all in big, bold text. Look at this one. It shows Joe Biden what his walk to the podium looks like. Every 10 steps are documented. Talk about a detailed instruction manual. Maybe they should publish it. We have a name too. A detailed guide on how to get around the White House if you are a president. But jokes aside, what are these documents about? Are Biden staffers just too efficient, or are they trying to prevent another Biden faux pas? We'll never have an answer to that, but some things are in plain sight. Joe Biden is old, 81 years old. He'll be 82 in November. If he wins, by the time he completes his second term as president, he will be 86. I would say that is too old to be in office, and Biden's aides agree. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., they say he's very engaged. But then what happens after 4 p.m.? Well, he's fatigued, he fumbles, he makes verbal mistakes. And after 8 p.m., it's a different picture altogether. A White House reporter even asked about it. Listen to this.
He's sharpest before 8 p.m. So say that the Pentagon at some point picks up an incoming nuke. It's 11 p.m. Who do you call? The First Lady?
He has a team that lets him know of any news that is pertinent and important to the American people.
And why is Biden not stepping down? Because he believes that he's the only one who can beat Trump, even if others don't agree. Joe Biden is a career politician. The prospect of remaining in power is too appealing. Plus, he's made comebacks in the past. He's survived many ups and downs. He fought a childhood stutter. His family died in an accident. He's dealt with scandals. But right now, what he needs is not another comeback. Sometimes winning also means walking away when the time is right. Our next story is from Bangladesh. On Sunday, the country's students took to the streets. They were protesting against the job quota system. You see, Bangladesh has hundreds of students, hundreds of thousands of government jobs. Now, 56% of these positions are reserved. So millions of citizens have to battle for the remaining 44% seats. This system was scrapped in 2018, but earlier this year, the Dhaka High Court brought it back, which is why students were protesting. They don't want the quotas. Today, the Bangladesh Supreme Court heard the matter and it has suspended the quota system for a month. But the students want a permanent solution. Our next report tells you more.
On Sunday, thousands took to the streets of Bangladesh. They were mostly university students. They blocked highways, sat on the railway lines, bringing Dhaka to a standstill. They were protesting against Bangladesh's job quota system.
Many talented students are leaving Bangladesh, and one of the main reasons is this quota system. A country where 56% in government jobs is reserved for the entitled people, where there is no place for deserving people.
Now, Bangladesh has hundreds of thousands of government jobs. The current system reserves over half of the posts. 30% is for the children of those who fought in Bangladesh's 1971 Liberation War. 10% is for women, 10% is for specific districts, 5% is for ethnic minorities, and 1% is for people with disabilities. So 56% of the total government jobs are reserved. That leaves only 44%. That's for the rest of the country's population. Students say this is discriminatory.
Being a woman, when our Prime Minister is a woman, our opposition leader is a woman, our Speaker of the Parliament is a woman, Bangladesh is a role model for women's empowerment in the world. Here being a woman, I don't think a separate quota in government jobs is required for the women.
In 2018, a similar protest broke out in Dhaka. Students protested against the quota system. They called for it to be scrapped. It led to violence, and finally the government scrapped the system. But this year, Dhaka's High Court rolled that back. It said that the cancellation was invalid, so the protests began again. The students have refused to return to classrooms if their demands are not met. And today, they got some relief. Bangladesh's Supreme Court has temporarily suspended quotas. The suspension is for a month. There will be further hearings on the matter. The students are cheering this latest verdict, but they want a permanent solution. What's that? A 10% quota in jobs only for ethnic minorities and those with disabilities.
We want a tolerable quota privilege in government jobs, and in 2018 we said that it can be 10% at best. We want the government to keep a tolerable percentage of quota in government jobs.
The protest for a change in the quota system is not surprising. In May, Bangladesh had 2.5 million unemployed people, a rise of 250,000 from the first quarter of 2024. So their anger is understandable. But what does the government have to say? Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina believes there is no justification for the anti-quota movement. She says that the students are wasting their time and believes the matter can only be solved in court. Well, for now, the issue is on hold, but we'll find out soon enough if Bangladesh will ditch its quota system for good.
Meanwhile, China has found a new enemy. It has ordered a fresh crackdown targeting the paychecks of executives this time. We're talking about the financial elite in the country. The Communist Party wants to put a cap on their salaries, so they will no longer be entitled to fatter paychecks. China is placing limits on salaries in the financial sector. Senior executives will not be able to earn more than $400,000 annually before taxes. $400,000, that's the upper limit. To make matters worse, China wants to apply these limits retrospectively. Meaning, if you've earned more than $400,000 in recent years, you'll have to return the extra earnings. Beijing is yet to spell out the specifics, but the plan has been set in motion. China is targeting senior executives in 3 areas: state-backed brokerages, mutual fund firms, and banks. Financial institutions backed by private investment can breathe easy. For now, they've been kept out of this. But this crackdown is sweeping in nature. Reports say some big companies have been hit. They're already working on tougher checks and balances, including on reimbursements. You heard that right. Even those bills, reimbursement bills, are also being carefully scrutinized. Now, a lot of you may know how this works, how companies use reimbursement bills as a way to compensate employees. In China, reimbursements are used to covertly make salary payments, possibly to avoid taxes. Now, this practice may come to an end going forward thanks to the new salary cap. Beijing is also tightening surveillance of the financial sector. More than 30 officials are under investigation as we speak. They're facing corruption charges. But what is driving this crackdown? Why are they doing this? The Common Prosperity Program of President Xi Jinping. He wants to reduce the wealth gap in China, the gap between the rich and the poor. So this policy is a way of redistributing wealth. But the approach could easily backfire. China's stock markets are in a downturn. Since 2021, they've lost well over $6 trillion. These are combined losses of Chinese and Hong Kong stocks. And now Beijing is targeting the stockbrokers. What message would this send to investors? To those who are looking to put money in Chinese stocks, how would they see it? China's financial markets are unpredictable. That's how the world will see it. Policies can change at the drop of a hat without any warning. So investing in China is a big risk. That's the message that goes out, and that's bad news for the Chinese economy at a time when they're struggling to revive growth. Xi Jinping's push for common prosperity could lead to further decline, and the Communist Party cannot afford that. For decades, economic prosperity has ensured their grip on power. Now there are reports of growing social unrest, increasing incidents of violent attacks. Last month, 4 university professors were stabbed in Jilin. A 55-year-old Chinese man was arrested. The police said the attacker was unemployed. A similar incident happened in Shanghai as well. A man attacked 3 passengers on a subway. Then there have been incidents like these. There have been multiple altercations in public, and these videos are going viral on Chinese social media, where netizens are discussing if workers in China are unhappy with their low-paying jobs and their shrinking incomes. And these may sound like isolated incidents, but they show a clear pattern of unrest in the Chinese society. Xi Jinping's economic policies are hurting people. If he doesn't change course, it could lead to his downfall. Speaking of jobs and paychecks, a massive protest has broken out in South Korea at the factories of Samsung. The tech giant is facing pushback from its workers. More than 6,000 workers have gone on an indefinite strike. For months, they've been demanding better pay and benefits from the management. More workers could join this strike in the coming days. And this has never happened before. This is the first time that Samsung has witnessed a mass walkout, the first in the company's history. Our next report tells you why the workers are unhappy.
Samsung has never seen a workers' strike in its lifetime. So when thousands of its workers refused to show up for work indefinitely, the story had to make waves globally. The workers' union is keen on sending a message to Samsung's management.
The important things we are considering are the company's founding day holiday, wage increases, and improvements to the performance bonus system for union members. These will be the main priorities.
Broadly, the workers have 3 demands: a 3.5% hike in their base salary, an extra day off to mark the union's foundation day, and a better bonus structure. Samsung is one of Asia's biggest conglomerates. In the last quarter, its profits jumped 15-fold. So financially, the company seems to be in good shape. This wasn't the case last year. In 2023, Samsung performed terribly. It reported sharp losses. The company's overall operating profit dropped to a 15-year low, mainly due to slow demand for its chips and devices. In recent months, Samsung has turned the corner. The AI boom aided the company's recovery. In the last quarter, sales increased by over 20%. That's the biggest rise since 2021. when the pandemic had sparked a surge in the demand for tech products. This time, the demand for semiconductors helped Samsung's bottom line. But the workers' strike could jeopardize this progress. Reports say manufacturing of chips has slowed down on some production lines. Samsung has rejected these claims. It has assured that the production won't be disrupted, and the company will keep engaging with the workers. The world will be watching closely how Samsung navigates this crisis. It may be a sign of things to come. Around the world, unrest among workers is increasing. There is widespread turmoil in the labor force. This year alone, over 100,000 employees were laid off from over 300 tech companies. Experts say a large chunk of these workers lost their jobs due to the rise of artificial intelligence. This has caused anxiety in other industries too. Last year, writers and Hollywood actors staged a walkout. They wanted better pay, a larger share in profits, and better healthcare. The actors pushed for protections from the use of AI. The strike ended after an impasse of almost 5 months. At Samsung, the workers have similar worries. The union says the management needs to treat the workers fairly. The stakes are high for Samsung. This company alone is responsible for 20% of South Korea's GDP. So a long period of disruption will have far-reaching consequences.
Now let's look at Pakistan, the country where the military is all-powerful and human rights and privacy are a myth. That may sound like a harsh assessment, but there's a reason why I say this. Take a look at what happened this week. Pakistan's civilian government handed over more power to the military to Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence or ISI. The ISI is now authorized to trace and intercept calls and messages. Some of you may be surprised to hear this. You may have assumed that the ISI already did all of it. After all, it's an arm of the all-powerful Pakistani military. The inter-services part in the ISI's name stands for the 3 branches of the military: the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. Military personnel populate the ISI offices, so it's definitely an arm of the Pakistani military, making them all-powerful in the country. How is it then that the ISI did not have phone-tapping powers? Well, this is Pakistan, a country always keen on getting handouts from everyone, including the West. Now, the West pretends to care about human rights, so Islamabad pretends to do the same. Pakistan has an article in its constitution promising the right to dignity and privacy. This right would be violated if the ISI had blanket access to phone calls. So for years, the country pretended that this wasn't the case. But now it has dropped the facade. The Pakistani government made the U-turn on Monday. It cited an old law, a law from 1996. Islamabad said that this law gave the ISI the power to snoop on anyone, all in the name of national security. The declaration provoked some outrage. Pakistan's opposition cried foul. A former human rights minister even cited 1984. That's a book by George Orwell, which describes a dystopian world under total surveillance. It's an apt metaphor for Pakistan. The new surveillance powers are being challenged. A petition has been filed in court, but at least until the case is resolved, Pakistan is now officially a surveillance state. And who knows, the petitioner may have their phones tapped. Some incriminating evidence could land them in jail or force them to withdraw the petition. We'll see soon enough how the ISI uses its new powers for security. In the meantime, perhaps the Pakistani public should count this as a win. They finally have a direct line to the real people in charge. Pakistan's politicians are puppets after all. Now citizens can talk directly to the establishment every time they pick up the phone. That was a bit of dark humor, but honestly, what else is there in Pakistan? Because if the people look at the situation too seriously, they might end up wallowing in despair. And if they try and speak the truth, they might end up in an early grave, like many of Pakistan's journalists. A record was set this year. In the first 6 months of 2024, 7 Pakistani reporters have been killed. They were mostly from smaller towns, and most were murdered for just doing their jobs. A record was set in 2024, but this is not a new phenomenon. Between 2012 and 2022, 53 journalists were murdered because of their work, because they tried to expose the rot in Pakistani society. Ironically, Pakistan ranks above India in the World Press Freedom Index. I'm not joking. India is considered more dangerous for journalists in Pakistan. New Delhi was accused of snooping on journalists using spyware called Pegasus. Well, now Islamabad seems to have done one better. Instead of bothering with fancy spyware, it has gone for the simple solution, giving the military unchecked power to spy on everyone. Let's see if that changes any of these Western freedom rankings next year. Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore are still stuck in space. They're both NASA astronauts. They were launched into the orbit on the 5th of June in Boeing's Starliner capsule. The astronauts were scheduled to stay there for a week, but it's been more than a month now and they're still there, stuck in space. What's worse, there is no confirmation on when they can return. There is no talk of a rescue mission. In fact, the agency seemed to be in denial mode. NASA and Boeing refused to accept that the astronauts are stranded. Here's a report.
June 5th, that's when two NASA astronauts were launched into space.
Calling down to Mission Control here in Houston.
Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore. They travelled to the International Space Station to complete a test flight of the Starliner capsule, which is a Boeing aircraft. The journey took 25 hours. The trip was completed successfully.
Lots of cheering here in the room, big hugs.
Williams and Wilmore reached the International Space Station. The astronauts were scheduled to stay there for a week, but that 1 week turned into 2, and soon it turned into more than a month. The astronauts are still stranded in space. But apparently that's the wrong term to use here, at least according to NASA. The space agency, along with Boeing, held a press conference recently. They addressed questions about the delayed Starliner mission, and instead of giving honest answers, they chose to issue a strong rebuttal. The NASA program manager overseeing the mission said, "I want to make it very clear that Butch and Suni are not stranded in space. Our plan is to continue to return them on Starliner and return them home." That's well and good, but guess he forgot to add eventually to that sentence, because the astronauts are still stuck in space. With each passing day, it sounds like the plot of a scary Hollywood movie. Instead, NASA chooses to fight over the semantics. And what's more, there's no time frame for the return. There's no talk of a rescue mission. And the vague answers don't provide much clarity about what's going on or how severe the situation is. This is what we know so far. The Starliner has 28 jets. During the journey, 5 of them, quote-unquote, behaved oddly. NASA and Boeing engineers are still studying the thrusters. They say that 4 out of 5 are working properly now. The other will not be used during the trip home. But they still don't fully understand what caused the problem. So they're still running a bunch of tests and analysis. None of this sounds very encouraging. But NASA and Boeing say that the Starliner is fully capable of bringing the astronauts home in case of an emergency. They claim to only be keeping the Starliner in space to better analyze what went wrong. And how long is that analysis expected to last? Well, they aren't sure. But soon they may have to work on borrowed time. The Starliner capsule has a limited battery. It can only spend 45 days in space. This is how long it was certified by NASA to last in the orbit. But now, NASA is hinting that the mission will last longer. They plan to certify it for an additional 45 days. Clearly, NASA and Boeing want to buy more time. Despite what they say, this does not inspire confidence. And in spite of their repeated explanations, we don't know if at this very moment the Starliner is safe to bring the crew home. We're still waiting for NASA to provide an answer.
Money makes the world go round. We've all heard that one before, but when it comes to Gen Z, it is TikTok that often does the job. Ironically, especially in matters of money. Apparently, 80% of Gen Z gets financial advice from social media. And what's their favorite platform? TikTok. It has birthed one finance trend after another, like treat culture or soft saving. What does it mean? These trends involve putting less money into the future and using more of it in the present. Basically, spend now instead of saving for tomorrow, which explains the findings of this survey. 60% of Gen Z say they rely on their parents for financial help. 40% say that they are financially squeezed, mostly thanks to excessive spending on non-essentials like coffee, clothes, and impulse buys. These trends can bring short-term joy, but they're breeding financial insecurity. So now there is a counter-culture at play, the no-spend challenge. It's a viral finance trend with more than 200 million views on social media. This challenge is like a spending fast. It involves paying for essentials such as rent, groceries, and other bills, but not buying unnecessary items. The challenge says goodbye to coffee or alcohol, bid adieu to eating out, and close your eyes when the sale prices flash. Because no more shoes, bags, or clothes. Imagine the horror. It's a great sacrifice. But what's the point of it? Well, that depends on you. Let me explain. This challenge has 4 basic steps. The first is to set a goal, to explain why you will save the money to build an emergency fund or to save long-term for retirement or short-term for a vacation. You set a goal. The second step is to have rules in place. You can have a no spending day or a week or a month, depends on you. The third step is to keep an account, to track your progress, your expenses and your savings. But none of this would matter without the fourth step, and that is reflection. To notice your spending patterns. For instance, 46% of shoppers spend money because of FOMO. That's what a survey found, 46% people. FOMO is the fear of missing out. And much of this is avoidable, especially because it doesn't always make us feel good. 64% of shoppers regularly regret spending on short-term pleasures. In such cases, the no spending challenge can be helpful. It can cultivate a habit of budgeting and free up money for more important things. So is the no spending challenge beneficial overall? The jury is still out. Proponents of the challenge forbid a range of so-called unnecessary items. And top of this list is usually coffee. Time and again, finance gurus have regurgitated this advice. They say, skip the coffee and you will be a millionaire. And generally, this is true. Let's try and break this down. Let's say you buy a Starbucks coffee every day. That is about $3 per day or about $100 a month. Now, if you invest the same amount every month at an interest rate of 12%, all hypothetical, in 40 years, you will have about $1 million. That is the power of compounding. But before you boycott Starbucks or whatever coffee you drink, let's look at the flip side. Often when people try to cut costs, small optional expenses take the first hit, like coffee or ice cream. Trimming these expenses never hurts, but it doesn't help much either. Instead, budgeting big-ticket items will save you more money. For instance, instead of buying an expensive car that you can't really afford, think about a cheaper one that gets the job done. And this is where the no spending challenge lacks. It fails to look at the real problem areas. It's like a quick fix, like a crash diet to trim your budget. Also, it's not for everyone. Gen Z, that is 12 to 27-year-olds, are driving this challenge. They are the ones shelling out financial advice, which honestly does not inspire tremendous faith. So take from this challenge what you can. Tighten those purse strings, notice how you spend your money, but also ask yourself, how much does 1 cup of coffee harm your budget? And what is the point of saving this money if you can't have a nice coffee sometimes? I guess, like with most things in life, moderation is key, not TikTok solutions. And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. In Argentina, President Milei climbs on top of a tank at the Independence Day parade. In India, monsoons lead to massive landslides in Uttarakhand, blocking the Badrinath National Highway. And zoos across China throw birthday parties for giant pandas. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1991, Boris Yeltsin was sworn into office. He was Russia's first elected president. Yeltsin was known for dismantling the Soviet Union and leading Russia in its first chaotic years of independence, or as a separate state, away from the Soviet Union. In 1997, Yeltsin gave Vladimir Putin his first job at the Kremlin and later in 1999 appointed him as Prime Minister. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Unidad. Saluda al público, a las familias concentradas, junto con la señora vicepresidente de la Nación, al mismo tiempo siempre excepcional en carácter informativo, y así se desplaza la unidad, y el presidente y la señora vicepresidente.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.